Hi everyone, and thanks for being with us at another wonderful conversation between Avery and myself. And we're going to be talking about something that's really important today, which is oh my God, what should we talk about? Let's make it about tariffs, because everybody is talking about what's happening in the United States. Donald Trump, as Avery will tell you, is the Orange Emperor. And one of the reasons why we need to talk about this, I think, is that, and I'll introduce Avery, bring Avery in just a moment, is that we need to consider what are the motives for Trump doing what he did. There's a number of motives. Number one is, this thing about him having been how can I put it? Having thought about this, having worked on this idea now for some 30 years or 40 years or so, in the 80s when he came up with this idea about tariffs being the most the tool that he would be able to use to change the world, I guess. And he's had this idea buried in his mind. And so Avery and I are going to talk about that. So hopefully you could join us in the conversation. Have a conversation either on YouTube or also on Facebook. So whichever one you're looking at, please have a conversation with us. In the meantime, how are you, Avery?
I'm very good. How are you?
Good. That was.
Good.
I was trying to be motivated. I haven't been motivated for the last few days because
Yeah, I know what you mean.
I've been looking at. I think I've been feeling depressed by all this tariff stuff, and my wife has been continually looking at our superannuation to see whether how much it's declined, and the organisation that manages, which is the university organisation that manages our superannuation, has been offline. So, as a result of that, we haven't been able to check it. So we've been panicking, thinking, well, if we're offline, maybe they've lost all our money. I don't know, but anybody who's on superannuation or 401ks in the US should be a little bit concerned about the impact of Trump's tariffs on particularly our super, I guess, even here in Australia. What do you think?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. There's a friend of mine that lives in Colorado. I've known him about 40 years, long before the internet was invented. When I was in the RAF based in Germany, he was a United States Air Force policeman based, on the same base. We became good friends. I heard from him just a couple of days after Trump launched those tariffs, so-called Liberation Day, and his 401k had dropped by $75,000. 2 days.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I can only assume that he's not a very happy vegetable. But I think that there are probably millions of people that have been affected the same. Whether it doesn't matter which part of the world you're in, if the stock market in the country in which you have. But yeah, the thing is, in Australia, we have, Avery, so much money, superannuation, invested in the UK Stock Exchange. In fact, I think we have more money in the UK Stock Exchange than anybody else.
UK or US?
Sorry, US. I meant US, pardon me.
Yeah.
Maybe some in the UK, but primarily in the US. And this is one of the selling points that the Albanese government thought that they would be able to place before the Trump administration, was that, hey, we've been able to provide you with all of this money through our super scheme, therefore you should be giving us some concessions. And to some extent, that didn't work. So what can I say?
It's never going to work because for Trump to concede, he'd have to admit that he made a mistake.
And we can't
Trump
have
never
that.
makes mistakes.
No, he
and
doesn't.
By the way, I don't call him the Orange Emperor. He's the Orange Hitler.
Oh, even
not
worse.
The Orange Emperor.
Yep. So I guess the conversation that I thought we could have then is around what is the now I'll put forward a couple of my motivations, and then I'll go to a couple of news items that we've got. So we'll do it in this order, if you like. So I think there's a number of things happening here. I think the number one issue is that Trump believes in this idea that has been with him for decades, that if we change the uh, if we use tariffs to manipulate the rest of the world, because um, the, there the United States has relied so long on other countries and has built up deficits with other countries because the United States just buys so much shit, basically, and that Trump sees that as other countries ripping them off. So let's start with that one. What do you think of that notion that the United States is being ripped off by everybody else simply because they're greedy bastards?
Well, Trump doesn't understand what deficits really mean. The deficit a trade deficit is that you are importing more from a country than you are exporting. If you're importing more, it's going to be reasons like it's a lot cheaper to buy that foreign-made good product than it is to buy a domestically made one. It also means that people have got more money to spend, and they're not spending. When somebody buys I don't know, an iPhone manufactured in Shanghai, they're not spending the money in Shanghai. They're spending it in the United States. They're spending it here in Australia. Right? So the money spent in the United States, spent here, goes back in our economy. Obviously, the cost of some of the money you spend goes to the manufacturer in China, but the bulk of it stays here, stays in the United States. And the more people spend, the better it is for the economy. Gets to a point when if people are spending too much, then you can get runaway inflation. But deficits, Trump thinks that means it's a bad idea to have a deficit, and it's not. It means that the country's doing well when you've got deficits. In the 1960s, I remember the only thing the government was ever talking about, early 60s, was the balance of trade deficit. And then they realized that's not actually so bad because we were doing so well in the late 50s, early 60s in the UK. The Prime Minister, Macmillan, said his slogan was, "You've never had it so good." And things were, compared with what had been like 10, 15 years earlier, excuse me, they were much, much better. People had money to spend, and they spent it. And because we couldn't produce bananas, for example, in the UK, we had to import them. We couldn't grow sugar in the UK; we had to import it. We imported foreign cars, and even though we manufactured them, they were cheaper buying them from other countries.
So it isn't.
But the money was spent in the UK.
But it doesn't strike me as all that complicated, all of this, because, it does make sense. And I know the world has changed over the last 40, 50 years, whereby, not if, the things that you don't make yourself, there's things that we choose not to make. And primarily, I guess, the one that sits out for me there's two actually, and one is clothing. We don't tend to make a clothing. That industry is now come from Vietnam, Cambodia, and so on. And the other thing that fascinated me is, we don't make, no one makes these, but we don't dig up diamonds in this country. Diamonds get dug up from people like Botswana, but not all that much compared to other countries.
We dig up a huge amount of diamonds from up in the Argyll region in northern Western Australia.
Well, that's huge blows my argument.
They're not as big as the ones in Namibia or South Africa, but we've still got or Botswana. We've still got a big diamond industry.
Yeah, the point I was going to make before you jumped in there, Avery, was really that the fact is that Botswana, for example, America they might have some diamonds, but that ostensibly they don't have any. It's not a big industry for them, if at all. But they rely on places like Botswana and South African countries in order to provide those diamonds. And that's all some of those countries do. That's all they've got. Yet the United States has chosen to levy them at 38%.
Yeah.
And that doesn't make any sense. Just like it doesn't make any sense if you're growing, if you're manufacturing clothing and you're choosing that manufacturer is elsewhere in another country, simply because you as a country have chosen not to do it because it's too expensive and other people do it better than you. And somehow, I don't understand why those notions have been missed by Trump. You know, like is he just
Yeah.
stupid or what? Why
Well,
would he miss some of those ideas?
because he thinks he knows everything. Everything goes back to what he thinks he knows. He's the greatest taxation expert, the greatest on tariffs, the greatest on trade, the greatest on you choose. You pick a topic, he knows more about it than anybody else, and nothing's going to change his mind about that. The only thing that'll change his mind is when he's put in a pine box and then buried in the ground. And the sooner that
But why
happens, the better.
doesn't? But yeah, but why don't? There must be people around him, like Bessett and others. Not what's the other dude, Navarro, whatever his name is. Um,
Navarro, Besant, Ludig, or something, not Ludig.
yeah, I'll get to him in a moment. I think
Oh,
it was
yeah.
so. But there's yeah. Why aren't there people around him? I guess saying to him, "Look, none of this is a good idea. We appreciate this is what you were thinking back in 1985, but today none of this stuff is relevant to what you're thinking, and this isn't the way the world works anymore. We've changed all of that, right? You know, you
Why?
get if we're going to make a car, we're going to get 100 different pieces for that car that are going to come from experts from all around the world, not just from the one place.
Yeah.
You know, and the other thing, sorry, go on.
No, you carry on.
The other thing too that concerns me, I guess, is that you know he wants to, which I guess is the third aspect of all of this, is he actually wants to have manufacturing return to the US, and he kind of has this vision, I think, that if you're manufacturing like motor vehicles, that you can somehow snap your finger and someone's going to say, okay, we're not going to manufacture all those parts or whatever it is that you want in China or in Asia anymore. We're going to start to build our factories here, and we're going to
Yeah.
populate those factories with staff who somehow are going to earn the same income that those people were earning in Vietnam and China. And therefore, we're going to be able to produce these goods as cheaply as what they'll be able to produce elsewhere. And we know that that's bullshit, that that's absolute
Yeah.
crap. So where does that? So to me, you know, I don't understand where those ideas come from, because you know, I'm not an economist, but I know that they don't make any sense.
They don't. Where they come from, again, go back to what I said. Trump thinks he knows everything about everything. He's got this fixed idea. He's not going to change his mind about it. Nobody can persuade him that he's wrong, because to persuade him he's wrong, he's got to admit that he was wrong, and he's never going to do that. People like Besant, they know better, but they live in fear. One thing is they live in fear that if I don't just agree with him and repeat what he says, I'm going to lose my job. And the other thing is, of course, that if they back him and he pushes that taxation policy through, who's going to benefit? Not the American people, the Besants of this world.
And of course there is another argument there too, whereby having the stock exchange go up and down as it has, that there might be some insider trading taking place between
That
Trump and his
wouldn't
family.
surprise me at all. It would
And
not surprise me at all.
and I think Adam Schiff is looking into that too. So
Yeah.
be interested to see what happens there. I'll just take us to the news items so that we could just have a discussion around this. So Donald Trump pauses most reciprocal tariffs but hikes China rates to 125%. US President Donald Trump has put a 90-day pause on his reciprocal tariffs just as hours after they had been placed on imports from dozens of countries. All trading partners except China will now be subject to the same baseline 10%, such as Australia has been,
Yeah.
rather than the additional rates announced by the President at so-called Liberation Day. In a social media post, Mr. Trump said he was again increasing the tariff on Chinese goods, this time to 125%. And I guess the point I wanted to discuss with you, what does this do in relation to inconsistencies? So what is there about Trump's up and down, backwards and forwards attitude towards something as important as finances and tariffs that may be a little bit confusing to most people?
Well, the inconsistency causes chaos, right? The manufacturers, they want a stable environment in which to operate. And if you've got somebody who says today I'm imposing a 25% tariff, oh no, sorry, it's 35%. Oh no, it's 125%. No, excuse me there. It's actually going to be 10%. They don't know where they stand. Is he going to change his mind again tomorrow? Is he going to push them up again tomorrow? Is he going to knock them back down? Is he going to knock them down to 5%? Get rid of them? What's he going to do? Nobody knows. So they would be very, very reluctant to invest. And talking about investment, the thing you were saying about car manufacturers, right? Trump. The thought that I had was a game I used to play called World of Warcraft, where you could build a factory in about 10 seconds. I think Trump thinks that's what happens, right? That he imposes the tariffs on Canadian cars, for example, and instantly a factory appears in Ohio. I saw this thing just yesterday where they estimated that to build a factory that would build 1,000 cars per month, I think it was. I think it was per month. It might have been per week. But the minimum cost would be over $1 billion. Right? A manufacturer that makes 12,000 cars a year is not a big car manufacturer. So you'd be looking at companies that would be making, say, 10,000, 20,000 cars a month. That makes for a much bigger factory. So much higher costs because you've got to build the factory itself. You've got to get all the equipment in there. You've got to get the formers that they use, the molds, the tools. You've got to train the staff because you're not going to find them just instantly. So you've got to bring them in and train them. You've got to do things like build all the infrastructure to deliver the materials that you need to manufacture the car, all of it. So you've got to build the roads, the bridges, whatever, in this new spot. Provide all, put electricity, gas, whatever, water, whatever other things that you need like that in there. Your cost goes from $1 billion to $5 billion to $8-10 billion, depending upon the size of the factory.
Yeah, and I
Trump
know.
thinks instantly, and people are going to do it.
We used to have a little
Oh, sorry.
organisation.
Can I just? I just thought one other thing, if I can. You think about this. You're a car salesman. And you've got a choice of paying, say, $1 million in, or you're a car manufacturer. You've got a choice of building the factories that you need to make the carburetors and the catalytic converters and the axles and whatever else that you need to manufacture. You can do it all in this country, all in the United States, right? And you've got a choice of either spending that, $1 billion to do that, or passing on the $200 million worth of tariff of the tariffs on your consumers. Which you're going to choose? You're going to choose I'll just pass on the tariffs. That means I don't need to spend $2-3-4 billion.
Yeah, good point. And I was just going to say I used to do some work with a little motor car manufacturing here in Adelaide called Holden's, and I used to do some work working with their staff around issues which were often about people dying on site, I hasten to add, or being injured, or about losing their jobs. But I can remember many times when they have to retool their sites because they're making a new car, redesigning cars, whatever. And I know just in that process costs millions and millions of dollars just to do that alone, let alone, as you say, bringing over and starting from scratch. It's just not practical. It's not practical, and it's not practical for even smaller. So there are people in small businesses, Avery, who rely on parts and stuff coming from overseas. They don't have, they're just barely making a living out of that. And so they are not in the position whereby they can just put up a factory because, they're busy just trying to survive from one week to the next.
You remember when we had Mitsubishi down at Tonsley Park?
Oh, yeah.
My brother-in-law used to work there, and they shut down for it was either 8 or 10 weeks to do a retooling for a new
Hmm.
model. You know, how much did that cost them? It would have been, I mean, this was 25, 30 years ago, but it would have cost them tens of millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars, maybe,
Yeah.
I don't know, but hugely expensive. And that's just because they're going to start
And
making a new model of car.
and we know it was expensive because they eventually bailed out of us out of Adelaide
Yeah.
because our industry was because we just
Yeah.
weren't able to sustain them
But you
because
just
and
reminded me
they
of
were
something
being
else.
built they were being built overseas primarily.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, go on.
Yeah.
You thought something else?
It
Yep.
just reminded me of something else. Yeah. There's somebody said to me on my Felon in Chief Facebook page when I said about the cost of manufacturing things overseas compared with in the USA. He said, "Oh, so you support slave labor?" Because the thing said that somebody manufacturing clothes in Vietnam gets paid $300 a month, something like that. And he said, "So you support slave labor?" Well, no, I don't support slave labor. They're not slave laborers either. What this clown in the United States is either ignoring or doesn't realize is the cost of living in Vietnam is a damn sight less than it is in the United States. Right. So people get paid proportionately less. It's not slave labor at all. I mean, there's going to be places you want slave labor, go to the garment district in New York. Right.
And I mean,
But
it does present a whole range of different arguments, doesn't it? Because
yeah,
um, they are poorly paid. They are
poorly paid compared to what?
compared to
Poorly paid
Western
compared to,
countries, compared to
but
us.
again, yeah, but look at what's their economy like. What's the cost of living like in Vietnam or Cambodia compared to the cost of living here in Australia or in the United States?
And there have been some sweatshops whereby children have been used,
No
employed
doubt about that.
on sense.
Yeah,
So there have been some terrible human rights violations
I'm
as
not
a result
denying.
of some of those things.
I'm not denying that. But the point is that if you're going to say that it's cheap labor, one of the questions is why is it cheap? It
Yeah, well,
could be because they're
it
all
is cheap.
slaves, right? But it
Yeah,
could be because the cost of living is so much lower.
yeah. Either way, the truth is it's cheap labour, and
It's cheap
that's
labor,
the end of the story,
and
really. I mean, we could
so
argue we could
they can
argue if it's
manufacture those
appropriate or
cars.
not, but there's been a lot of people, particularly in China, I think, probably Vietnam as well, who have been able to move above uh, the lower class and raise them out of poverty
Do you know
because
one of the
of the
reasons
amount of
why?
investments. Yeah, one of them
Do you know
because
one
they've
of
been
the
able because the capitalists have invested in China and Asia.
because the Chinese government, the Vietnamese government, have invested in free education for their people.
Well, I
And in
don't
the
know if I'd.
United States of Trumpistan, they want to abolish the Department of Education to make the country stupider. I mean, it's stupid enough because they elected a fascist as president, but
True.
you know, they want to make it even worse. The United States was famous for the innovation and science and technology, and look what they're doing now.
Just think, I think I might have lost you there, Avery. I'm not too sure. I'm not hearing anything on my headset.
I'm
So,
not speaking at
I,
the moment.
all right, you are now. I can hear you now. Sorry, I
Yeah.
just came back. Sorry. So you were saying that one of the reasons is bad education. Is that what you were saying?
Yeah, the Chinese, you don't pay to go to college in China. You don't pay to go to college in Vietnam. It's free of
Mm,
charge,
mm.
right? And in the United States, you run up massive debts to go to college.
Yes, and I am a great advocate. I said in the post recently that one of the things we ought to do in Australia now is to bring back free education, as the Whitlam government
Absolutely.
did back in
It-
'72. So, yeah, we need
To
to we need to do that as well.
to look at
Just
education as though it was an impost on the country, it's freaking ridiculous. It's an
well,
investment in the future.
education
An
is a
educated
is a way out of
workforce.
poverty.
Yeah,
Yeah. So I just want to take us to back to this article. So the US stock surged on the news of the pause, recovering some of the past week's losses. Within minutes of Mr. Trump's social media post, S&P shot up with more than 7%. It finished the day at 9.5, the biggest one-day gain since 2008. So Mr. Trump was asked if the markets had any influence. This is the issue. Had influenced his decision to hit pause. He responded that he had been watching the bond market. Now, I don't know what do you know about the bond market?
Bonds are when you buy stocks, you're buying a share in a company. All right. When you buy a bond, you are giving money. That company's giving money to you, which you've got to pay back.
Yeah.
I think that's the way it works. It's that way around it. There's money goes between. You don't have with the stocks. You don't have a debt. With a bond, there's a debt. Right, and bonds, depending upon the bonds that you get, can be a much safer investment than, much less volatile than the stock market.
Yeah, so I just looked it up here. The bond market is where various debt instruments are sold by corporations and governments. Bonds are issued to raise debt capital to fund operations or seek growth opportunities. Yeah. So people buy bonds when they're setting up an organisation, when they're having to pay. So if someone needs to buy goods from another country, they might use the bonds in order to pay for those goods. Issuers promise to repay the original investment amount plus interest. So that's what the bond market is. So the issue around the bond market is that and I don't quite understand this 100%, but certainly China has a lot of American debt. So people have bought bonds in order to pay for, because bonds are considered, because they're guaranteed by the government, they're considered to be stable, less likely for fluctuation. And so people who are buying stuff from China would pay for them in these bonds, which means that the Chinese have accumulated a lot of these American bonds as guarantees, I guess, that people will pay the debts to China, and they're worth trillions of dollars. And so if the bond market crashes, that is, the United States government says, well, look, just forget about paying those bonds, it's to China, we don't give a shit anyway. The whole system that has been put in place to be able to manage and transfer funds would collapse. Yeah. That's it in a nutshell. So this is why. So this is, and this hasn't been talked about. So Trump. I'll just come back to this article because this is where it came from. If I can just find it. So the bond market right now is. Well, he doesn't even know what the bloody bond market is. He said, but I saw it last night where people were getting a little bit queasy. So I guess the issue here for me is that this is a subject that not many people are talking about. Maybe because we don't understand it. I don't really understand it either because I don't understand economics. But certainly the amount of money that Chinese hold over the United States is exceptional. It's trillions of dollars because of these bonds. And that if the Americans pull out from the bonds and refuse to pay them, everything collapses. This is the real issue. But the issue is there because the Americans have chosen to use this system in order to purchase goods. They have made the decisions to purchase the goods from China and other countries. Yeah. China. We must remember that China hasn't forced them to buy stuff, right? Americans have bought it because it's been cheaper than the stuff they've been able to make themselves. Yet somehow Trump believes that he must blame China.
Well, as I said right at the beginning, he doesn't understand deficits. He doesn't understand trade. I didn't say it at the beginning, but he's not the world's greatest businessman like he claims to be. Six times businesses have gone bankrupt. God knows how many shut down because of incompetent management. He bankrupted 3 casinos in Atlantic City.
Yeah.
They're cash cows. Nobody bankrupts a no
Well,
sane
somebody
business.
does. Somebody does
Yeah,
because he
Trump
did.
did.
Yeah,
Yeah, three
exactly.
times.
Exactly.
You know.
So
Uh,
the other thing too that I just wanted to talk about was this one. So China slaps 84% tariffs on US goods as EU announces retaliatory levies. So the EU has decided that they're going to band together to punish the United States. China and the EU Union have announced a new retaliatory tariffs in response to the US President Donald Trump's Liberation Day levels. China has announced on Wednesday to continue ratcheting up its tit for tat tariffs. Good on them. This is an increase from the 34% previously announced. The US escalation of tariffs on China. This is what I think this is the Chinese finance minister. The US escalation of tariffs on China is a mistake on top of a mistake, which seriously infringes of Chinese legitimate rights and interests and seriously undermines the rules-based multilateral trading system, says the Chinese minister. And as a result, Trump's announced his pause. So
yeah.
China has, and also so the EU now have also come out. I don't know if this article talks about that, but certainly the EU have come out now. I read an article on that the other day. Can't see that there, but it has created a massive problem. So, and also Richard Miles. So we'll just go to this one. Richard Miles says Australia will not join hands with China to resist. So the Chinese government have asked the Australian government to get involved in their fight against the United States, and we have said no. We're not going to do that. Australia will not work with China to resist. I thought it was very nice of China to ask us. Nevertheless,
Yeah.
Australia is not to work with China to resist Donald Trump's tariffs, even as his latest escalation threatens to damage both countries. Richard Miles has rejected an invitation from the Chinese ambassador, to join hands with Beijing in solidarity. I don't know what you think about that, but I actually think it wouldn't do us any harm to
No, I agree.
say bugger you. You've put these 10% tariffs on us. They weren't reciprocal tariffs because fuck, we send more stuff to you than we do buy from you. No, the other way around.
Yeah.
We buy more stuff from you than you do us.
Then, yeah.
And so, you're putting a 10% tariff on us. So bugger off. In fact, if you want to get really tough about this, United States, then perhaps we should say we'll piss off from Pine Gap as well. Get rid of the bases that you have in the Northern Territory or wherever they might be. And we're not going to share information with you around intelligence.
Yeah.
And we're going to do away with AUKUS. We're not going to send you $4 billion or whatever it is for AUKUS.
Yeah, that one they might change their mind about. I don't think they'll change their mind. They'll kick out the Pine Gap people. It's just too important, just in general, to the security in the free world. So I can't see them shutting that one down. Well, in other words,
no. Just remember, these are. I agree with you. These are just crazy ideas from Tony Tonkin. Who knows what the reality is around absolutely anything that I say, for that matter. I just want to remind people to contribute to me and the show. Avery. So, what's your final thoughts around all of this?
Well, before that, just remembered that the mouth of Sauron, also known as Carolyn Levitt, said that no country has spoken to China to work with China against the United States, and she's wrong as usual. I mean, she's always wrong. South Korea and Japan are working with China against the United States. I think we should too.
All right. So
you were going to ask.
So South Korea and China, are they?
South Korea, China, and Japan working together. They're talking to each other about working together to oppose what what the Trump regime is doing.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And how are they doing that? Do you know?
I don't. I'm not party to the negotiations, but
Oh, aren't you? Oh, right. So
no,
you don't have any high-level influence. They're not
no,
inviting you
unfortunately not.
to the table to talk about any of that
No,
stuff.
I got the memo that it was going to take place, but not the invitation. So
All right. So I thought, Avery, we might just finish on Australian politics because there is an
yeah,
election happening, and I posted a YouTube video last week saying I'm finding it the most uninteresting campaign I can imagine.
oh, yeah,
But there seems to be a groundswell in relation to independence at the moment. Albanese's popularity apparently is increasing slightly. I don't know what the hell that means. I don't know why anybody could ever think much of Dutton because I just think he's a waste of space and
yeah.
a very uninteresting man. And Albanese isn't all that far ahead of him, I hasten to add. But certainly the Teals and independents seem to be making some ground. I'm just wondering what you think
Yeah,
about all of that.
yeah. I didn't watch the debates that have taken place, but what I've read, what I have seen, lackluster doesn't even come close to describing the campaigns by Dutton, who's got to be one of the most boring men on the freaking planet, and Albanese, who's close behind him on that. I would hate to see Dutton win. There's only one policy he's got, and you and I are going to disagree about it, so I won't mention it, that I support. But in general, I hope that the Liberals really get trounced.
Yes, and I think
They go,
I don't know. I'm not going to hedge any bets on any of that because
oh, neither am I.
I think it could go either way, and it could certainly be a hung parliament at the end of the day. So who knows? So I'm assuming that there'll be plenty for us to talk about next week because this tariff stuff will probably be there. There'll be some sort of escalation around all of that. I'm just hoping that at the end of the day, my wife will be able to access the web page for our superannuation and find that it's still all intact.
I was going to say the thing that I'm looking forward to doing this week is reading Donald Trump's obituary.
Oh, Jesus. And fair enough, and we can only hope. But thanks, mate. I'll catch up with you in 5 seconds. In the meantime, just like to say to everybody, please subscribe to my channel to ring the bell for further notifications. And if you've got any ideas about topics that you'd like Avery and I to discuss that we haven't discussed to this point, then please let me know. In the meantime, take care, look after yourselves, and more importantly, be safe.